All right, we will get going. Thank you, everybody. How many people, is this the first time to the e-Center? By hand. That's great. Gosh, what great progress. So welcome back. So that probably means you know who I am. So I'm Ian Grant, Executive Director of the Entrepreneurship Center. And that's Tim Sicard there, who's smiling at me because I say this every time. Really great to have a great group here. Amazing speaker tonight. But before that, just a couple of housekeeping components. So obviously, second half of the semester, we're wrapping things up. So this coming weekend, in partnership with the IOL, is the Ideathon Hackathon. So it's $2,000 of cash prizes for a 24-hour gig. For those of you that don't know what that is, basically you'll be given a problem. You ideate on that, come up with it, make a presentation that answers it, and then the sponsors of that will then pick the winners of that. So if that's something you're interested in, go to the eCenter website on the calendar, click on that. It's not too late to register. Again, you can come as a team, you can come automatically, be assigned. It's a really cool program. Once you've done it once, it's a little bit addictive, so just be forewarned. In 3 weeks, on Thursday, we'll have our last speaker series. Two amazing alums will be here, so keep an eye out for that. That'll either be here or in the back training room, depending upon scheduling for that. For those of you that want to perfect your pitch, either for your own idea or for yourself, if you're thinking about maybe some internships or other jobs, eClub is hosting their pitch competition on the 18th, I think, right? So that's in a couple weeks, so Friday's the 1st, so probably 2 or 3 weeks. So look out for that. You'll get emails from eClub. That's a really good opportunity to do that. Is there prizes for that, Benny? Yeah. So there's prizes for that as well. Those of you, by this time you should already know, if you're doing I2 Passport, please swipe. For most of you that's worked. If it didn't work, just try one more time. It's for some reason a little wonky today, so to save sending Heather an email, just try maybe on the way out, just to see if it works later. As we always do, obviously there's dinner, so a lot of you helped yourself. We have raffle, several different prizes. I think about maybe 8 or 9 prizes, so stick around at the end. We'll do some drawings for raffle. And then the books are already gone, but for those of you that have them, Bill has signed some of yours, which is great. He's going to stay around after to sign the rest of them. So if you'd like that, he's doing not just his signature, he's actually doing probably the most thoughtful book signing I've ever seen. Really trying to learn about who you are, what you're interested in, and personalizing it. So always need to have that, and it will be worth something even more than it is today. So,
unless you want to resell it.
yeah, no, valuable. In a lesson of the importance of sometimes conferences and networking, Bill and I met 5 or 6 years ago. There was a conference on Nantucket just for founders of companies. And somehow we randomly got seated at the same place for dinner, and we started talking. At that time, he was CEO of a company called Mobiquity, which was like this super hot Boston startup. It had just been funded, I think, like $20 million or something at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting next to the founder of Mobiquity. So anyway, so we kept in touch and LinkedIn, and so it's amazing on the journey, right? That was 5 or 6 years ago, and we've kept in touch. And with his new book, it seemed like a really optimal time to bring him up to share his story and stories, actually, with you all. I went to his LinkedIn, so I may not exactly have this right, but he's been a CEO or chairman of 11 companies, sits on 14 board of directors or advisors, 10 successful exits, which means he sold companies that he started or co-founded 10 different times. Went to Penn State, MBA from Carnegie-Mellon, and the book that you have is Press Go, Lessons Earned by Serial Entrepreneur. So with that, Bill, it's your show. Great to have you. Thanks.
Thank you. So even though it was 88 degrees in Naples, Florida when I left yesterday to come here, and even though JetBlue didn't get me to my home in Boston until 4:45 this morning, I'm still delighted to be here. I got to tell you that I had no idea of the hotbed of innovation and entrepreneurship you have here. More than 10,000 companies launched. You got an Alumni Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame, number 24 ranking nationally, conferences, classes, sessions like this. Not too long ago, well, a long time ago, I went to Penn State, got my undergraduate degree there, and back then it was still a big university. I had my choice of 275 different majors I could choose from. Our course catalog was, I think, that thick. Every course that you could possibly imagine you could take, and I did. I took making ice cream. I took a courtship and marriage. But Penn State did not offer their first class in entrepreneurship until more than 30 years after I graduated. So I got to tell you, I think you have a really exciting thing going on here. You should be very, very proud of it. And I'm proud that I'm part of it with you this evening. So how did I get here? So born in a small coal mining town, 12 miles southwest of Pittsburgh, raised in a company home with 2 bedrooms and grandparents and parents, shared that till I went to college. That's what Pittsburgh looked like back then. That was not a picture taken at night, that was a picture taken at noon. And a lot of coal, a lot of steel. There were 888 different coal mines, working coal mines within a 20-mile radius of my home. But it was mostly steel that fueled the economy of Pittsburgh back then, employing something like 60% of all the male workforce. 38 different steel companies there. So everybody I knew growing up, all my role models were steel workers and coal miners. My father was a steel worker. His 5 brothers were steel workers. My mother worked in a steel company. My grandfather was a coal miner, and my grandmother was his mail order bride. I met him for the first time when she got off the boat in Lithuania. So I'm a blue collar guy from Pittsburgh. So, as Ian said, engineering degree from Penn State, MBA from Carnegie-Mellon. And then back then, if you were an MBA, you always try to find a job in the biggest, safest company you could find. The biggest Fortune 1000 company. Mine was Air Products and Chemicals, which was a Fortune 100 company. Was there 12 years, did well. I was the executive responsible for supply chain and materials management, the CIO of the company. But no matter how well I did there, I just didn't feel like I was having much of an impact on the company. I felt like a small cog in a big, fat, stuffy chemical company. And that just continued to gnaw at me until I had a chance to attend Harvard Business School executive program where they shared some research on how information technology can drive a competitive advantage, not just in established companies, but in startups as well. So, that got me thinking. I went back to Air Products. I had a promotion that I turned down. I resigned from the company. I got contact lenses, shaved my mustache, and then joined the world of the dark side, the world of startups. And since then, I've been on the path that Ian's talked about. My first stop along the way, if you were going to join startups, you came to Boston. We even had road signs that said America's Technology Region. This is where all the startups were at that point in time. 128 was the first, quote, information highway. And I landed a position with McCormick and Dodge here, and M&D was the largest and fastest growing ERP company at the time until SAP and Oracle dominated that space. And I was the general manager of 2 of the 5 business units. And when I joined, it was everything that I thought a startup would be. It was the excitement and the autonomy and the informality and the feeling that you were actually getting something done. And then a week into it, I had a chance to attend my first sales call. Excited about that because I was at Air Products for 12 years and an executive for a long part of that time, and I never was invited to attend a sales call before. I never met a customer at Air Products. I never met a prospect at Air Products. So excited about that, and I had a chance to accompany my sales exec to a industrial glove company in the Midwest. And thought I did well. First sales call, you're never sure. Thought I did well, engaged with the CEO, worked with him for the afternoon and his team. Thought I represented the company's value proposition well. And then on the plane back, I said, how'd I do? And she said, well, you did really good, but Bill, this is sales. You never know until the check comes. So we get back, check doesn't come. Check doesn't come for the first week. Second week, check doesn't come. Third week, I'm walking past my desk and I see a FedEx envelope there. I'm thinking, maybe that's a check. And I go to it and I open it up and it's addressed to me. I open it up and there's a purchase order in there for the full suite of products that M&D sold. And then attached to that was a check for $865,000. And I looked at the check and it was not made out to McCormick and Dodge. It was made out to me. Bill Seibel, in care of McCormick and Dodge. My name was on the check. Am I having an impact on the company? You betcha. I just got the biggest deal of, that they had, and did it within my first 2 weeks of the job. So that's what's sold me, and that's what sort of has engaged me with following entrepreneurship, and it's having that sort of impact on companies. So also wrote a book. I guess that's why I'm here today. Tell you a little bit about why I wrote it. Always wanted to write a book. First try, I was 12 years old. That's the cover. I'm not too proud of the artwork. It was not my best work. But it came because my father took me to a James Bond movie. And the next morning I woke up at 12 years old and I said, I'm going to write the next James Bond action thriller. And came up with the name Murder a la Mode. Not bad for a 12-year-old, right? In fact, there are there was a best-selling book, a movie, and a TV series that actually used that title a number of years later. So got the title right. But at 12 years old, what did I know about action? And I certainly didn't know anything about thrills, not in the James Bond, Ian Fleming sense. And so I gave it everything I got. I got about a chapter and a half, and I gave up. 4 other times I tried to write a book. 4 different titles, different times, and never got it past half of a book. But this time was different. This time it wasn't just about me writing a book that allowed me to check a box and say, I wrote a book. This time there were there were mistakes I made, and lessons I learned from them that I wanted to capture and share with a broader group of people while I still could. One of the things that I think I'm most proud of in my career is that I've had more than 150 people that I've worked with that worked for me that afterwards became CEOs of their own company. And you sort of hope if that happens that maybe in some small way the adventures and misadventures I shared with them helped them anticipate and avoid some of the obstacles that were coming in the way. So I wrote Press Go to be able to take those stories and those lessons and share them with a broader group of people like you. When I was at a conference about 3 weeks ago, also in New Hampshire, at the end of it, someone raised their hand and said, "Bill, most business books only talk about one secret to success, maybe 2. They oversimplify it. Do you know how many lessons you have jam-packed in Press Go?" I didn't. And he says, "Well, I counted them, 143. Nobody can remember 143 lessons." And he went on, he said, the entire Jewish faith is based on 13 principles. Christianity is defined by 8. Muslim is 5, Hinduism is 4. You have 143. You can cut to the chase and simplify them so that people can remember them and understand them. So what I thought I'd do today, if it's okay with you, is talk about some of the companies I started and how they got started, but tie them into the 7 most important lessons for new and inspiring entrepreneurs. Does that work okay? Okay, so raise your hands if you are a new or aspiring entrepreneur. I want to see who's here. Great. Okay, so think about what hooks you. And raise your hand again if you're hooked by fame and fortune. If it's the pursuit of fame and fortune that's getting you there. That's good, because that ain't going to work. If you look at the data on success for startups, most of them fail, and the ones that don't fail, most of them don't do okay. So if it's fame and fortune, just buy a lottery ticket. How about being your own boss or controlling your lifestyle and schedule? Yeah? That hasn't worked for me. And it's because when I raise money from an investor, I feel like I'm working for them. I can't let them down. And then I have a board that I'm working for that they can fire me anytime they want to at their whim. And then I have customers who are taking a chance that I can solve their problem with a brand new product that hasn't hit the market before. How can I let them down? And then I have people that are part of that left their jobs because they believe that I can help them satisfy their personal and professional ambitions and make payroll. And so I feel like I'm working for them. So for me, I thought that, but I found that I felt like I had more bosses in a startup than I ever did in Air Products at any point in time. So for me, it was having that impact that I talked about at M&D and creating a special company. A special company for me is one that's successful, one that's sustainable, it's able to survive market turbulence. It's one that delivers great value for customers. It's one that fulfills the personal and professional ambitions of the employees. One where the employees are proud that they're a part of it. When sort of the dream is that they come back 30 years later with their grandkids and point at a product or something and say, I helped build that. And then the final thing is if the company can defy what everybody says is possible, even the experts, especially the experts, a company can do that. For me, that's the greatest professional high in the world. And so I've been in pursuit of trying to create a special company for 30 years. And it's aspirational. It's not who we are every day, but it's who you want to be every day. That's hooked me. So first lesson then of this 7 is don't start a company unless you find something that you're passionate about. If you're passionate about it, it'll become an obsession, but it'll become a good obsession. It'll be something you think about day and night, but it'll be something that energizes you day and night. Now, does anyone have an exit plan for their startup yet? That's good, because if you have an exit plan, it's not an obsession. And that's because if you're an entrepreneur, it's not just about getting the reward, it's about the journey that gets you to getting that award. It's like Sisyphus, the king of Corinth, who was punished by the gods to roll a boulder up the hill for eternity, only to see it roll back down again. Being an entrepreneur is a little bit like defying gravity. And it's also about not just enjoying the reward of getting that rock to the mountaintop, but it's mostly about savoring the experience of pushing the damn rock up the hill. So find something you're passionate about, because then that won't just help you enjoy the result, but that'll help you really enjoy the experience and the journey along the way, and that's what really drives you. So how do you find a good idea? Where do good ideas come from? So I'll tell you the story of Cambridge Technology Partners getting started. In the early 90s, there was a Standish report that came out that talked about the state of IT projects in the US. And it was pretty grim. 16% completed anywhere near on time and budget. Huge overruns, many of them abandoned, lost opportunity costs in trillions of dollars. So if you were a business executive in the early 90s, you knew that it was very likely that your most important IT project would never be implemented. And you were resigned to the fact that there's absolutely nothing you could do about it. And that was until we launched Cambridge Technology Partners to address that problem. So Cambridge was a small company that had a sister company called Cambridge Technology Group. CTG generated all of our revenue. They were an education company that got people excited about what could be built, and we were the implementation company that built it. So they had all the sales, and they had all the marketing, and they had all the pipeline, and then we did the sort of the dirty work to make this stuff work. We had a riff. And so because of the dispute, we split apart, and all of a sudden, we had nobody in sales, nobody in marketing, no pipeline, no customers, but we had 40 people that were on the payroll that we had to support. So Jim Sims, our CEO, called 3 of us into his office and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to rebuild this company as a consulting company, and we're going to build a sales force. But before we can do that, we need to come up with a engaging customer value proposition that sales force can use to drive business. And that's what we're here today to do. We're going to create an engaging customer value proposition for a consulting company. And I raised my hand, I said, Jim, how are we going to do that? None of us have been consultants before. And he said, Bill, we've all been victims of consultants before. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down what we don't like about consultants, and then we're just going to do the opposite. So we gave it a go, and Jim hands me the marker, and he says, I don't like consultants who, they're the experts, but when they're wrong, we have to pay the price. And so he said, write down fixed price, fixed time frame. We don't like consultants get their hooks in you, and you can never get them out the door. write down empowerment. We don't like consultants who take forever to deliver things. We don't like consultants who leverage their relationship and don't do the right thing. So we did that for about an hour and a half, and at the end of that he said, good, we got the list. He grabbed the marker from me, he circled fixed price, fixed time frame, rapid application development, empowerment, always do the right thing. He says, that's our value proposition. Now, Bill, your job is to figure out how the hell we're going to do that. And so we were able to do that, and that value proposition got us in 18 months from no revenue to an IPO. Not just an IPO, it was the #2 IPO in the world that year. And 5 years after that, we hit $5.3 billion market cap and 5,000 employees across the world, all really driven from scratch by an impactful value proposition. So the lesson is a good idea starts with the customer, not the technology. It's easy to get caught up in how cool the new technology is, and then it can drive, what can I do with it? But the technology that I used to build Cambridge Technology Partners platform was 28 years old at the time. With Zephyr, it was 18 years old. With Mobiquity, it was 38 years old. So it takes a long time for a technology to catch on and really be absorbed by the mainstream. It takes a long time for things to happen fast for a technology. And when it finally does catch on, it's not because the technology has fundamentally changed all of a sudden. It's because the business problems that people are trying to solve have fundamentally changed all of a sudden. So the lesson there is find what that problem is. What problem needs to be solved? Do people, a lot of people and a lot of companies want to solve it? Can you figure out how you can credibly solve it and communicate that? Will they pay for the solution? If they have a budget, that's even better. Is it a big, hairy, complex problem? That's great. Is your solution big and complex? That's bad. Because in a startup, more startups fail because their solution is too complex than too simple. Simple's always better in a startup. So when you get through that list, capture it in a succinct customer value proposition. And that's not what you do. That's why a customer should buy from you. It's not what you do. You frame why you do what you do and capture that. And then worry about the technology. The technology comes in later after that. So when I talk about this, people say, well, if the success rate in startups is so low, when do I give up? When do I surrender if 1% succeed? So what I believe is if you should never give up unless the problem's gone away, or unless someone else solved the problem, or unless you stop believing that you can solve the problem. Because unless you believe you can do something in a startup, you'll never be able to do it. And if you can convince yourself, you got to convince your team. If you convince your team, that confidence is what's going to carry you through all the tough times. And so you'll find yourself pivoting. And the average successful startup pivots 5 times before they find the path to where they're going to go. So that brings me to the third lesson. How good are you at executing Plan B? I think the most important early indicator of a startup team's success is how good they are at executing Plan B. Why would that be? Yeah.
Because that means that they execute the plan. Well, actually, no, I don't know.
Okay.
Things never go as expected.
Right. Plan A never happens. Right. And you always have Plan A until you get punched in the mouth, and then you got to adjust. So, the story of starting Cambridge Technology Partners Europe. So, a year after we rebuilt Cambridge Technology Partners, our CEO Jim Sims decided to launch international, and irrational decision. The board told him that it was way too early. We were way too young. We didn't have enough money. We didn't have any experience establishing any other offices, even in the U.S. We had 2 offices in the U.S. One, and that's only if you counted the 8 people we had in the basement of used aircraft working on a project. So we really only had 1 office, and we didn't have anybody in the company who had any international experience. But he was committed to doing it. He asked me to go to Europe to run it. I think it's probably because I was expendable. So my wife, Carol, and I, she was a project manager, and Harold, a technology guy, went to Amsterdam to start Cambridge Technology Partners Europe. And we did that by combining with the largest IT organization in Europe at that time, Getronics. They were excited about us because we had the value proposition of fixed price, fixed time frame that was driving all of our success in the US and all of our growth. And we were excited about them because they had consultants and infrastructure and brand and experience doing business in Europe. They spoke the language, partnerships, infrastructure, everything we needed. But about 2 months into the joint venture, I could tell it was starting to fail. And the reason was because they were using us as sort of candy or bait. They get people excited about our value proposition, they'd win the client and deliver it in their old traditional way. And so I just knew that the venture wasn't going to succeed. So I walked into the CEO of Getronics, again, a huge company, and said, I've decided to disband the venture and do this on our own. And he waited a few seconds and he just burst in hysterical laughter. And it seemed like it went on forever. And finally he stops and he says, you know, you have no prospects, no customers, no pipeline, no marketing, no sales, no infrastructure, no brand, and no partners. You have only 3 people, none of which speak any of the languages here, and none of which have ever done business internationally before. Are you sure you thought this through? You know, and he was right. I hadn't. As CEO, you're supposed to know what to do. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that the venture wasn't going to succeed, and I knew that I had to do something to make sure it didn't fail. And so we loaded up all of our belongings in the car, circled the A10 in Amsterdam, and tried to develop Plan B. And so what's the first thing you need when you don't have anything? You're 3 people. So we said an office. But we wanted to get an office. I wanted to get an office that symbolized entrepreneurship because we knew we were doing this on our own. And so Carol, my wife says, well, what about basement? A lot of startups get formed in basements. And I said, Carol, everything in Amsterdam is under sea level. They don't have any basements. So Harold says, so what about a garage? Hewlett Packard started in a garage. And I said, Harold, there aren't any garages in Amsterdam. There aren't even any parking spaces in Amsterdam. So then Carol said, what about an attic? There are a lot of attics in Amsterdam. So we decided to move into an attic, 15th century townhouse, and had our international headquarters in the attic with 3 of us. So the next thing you do is you need infrastructure. In order to get infrastructure there as a foreigner, you had to leave your passports behind for payment. So it was a good thing because we were stuck. We couldn't leave the country now for 3 months. Then what you needed, we thought, was somebody who spoke the local language. We couldn't recruit anybody that had any experience. All we could do was recruit one kid out of university who was going to graduate in 2 months, and he said he'd join us after he came on board, after he graduated, he'd come on board. And then we needed clients. And so we all cold called. We cold called for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day for 2 months. And if you think cold calling sucks, try it in a language that no one speaks that you're calling. So we went through that process and finally got our first lead, a company called Unichema in Emmerich, across the border in Emmerich, Germany. That was one of Unilever's 640 companies, divisions that they owned at the time. And so we were working hard. We couldn't screw this up. We had to do it. And then on the Saturday before the engagement, I got a call from the person who ran the company. And he said, I have bad news for you, Bill. Fritz, your sponsor for the project, died in his sleep last night. And so we're going to have to cancel the project. And it was the only project we had. It was the only thing in the pipeline. We were counting on that. And so that's when I remembered that sales is the art of overcoming objections. So I said, Fritz told me, he shared with me that this project was going to be his legacy. It's what he wanted to leave behind. I'm sure he's told me, he's told everyone else that he's worked with that this was what he wanted to be remembered by. So I'm sure he's told you as well. What do you, Fritz is up in heaven looking down right now. We can't cancel this project. We can do this for Fritz. And he bought it. And he bought it. So now we had our first project, and on that Monday, and that was the day the kid from had graduated on Friday. That was the day the kid started, and he didn't know anything about what we did. It was his first hour at work, but as a show of force, we decided to bring him, so there would be 4 of us. So we go across the border to Emmerich, Germany, and Fritz spoke 8 languages. So I was under the wrong assumption that everybody in Germany spoke 8 languages. We get there, and everybody that was there only spoke German. And all of us spoke nothing but English. And our new sponsor spoke Dutch and German, and our kid that was on the first day of the job spoke German and Dutch. I'm sorry, Dutch and English. So imagine a consulting engagement that you can't mess up. You ask a question in English, it gets translated by this kid the first day on the job to Dutch. It gets translated by the sponsor from Dutch to German. The Germans argue about it for about 20 minutes. German to Dutch, Dutch back to English, and you get like a 5-word answer. So you're missing some of the context, right? But we were able to get through it, and we delivered a quality control, client-server quality control solution for them that year won the award for the best IT implementation across all 640 companies at Unilever. So Fritz was looking down saying, that's my legacy. But for us, it fueled the growth, because now Unilever became our largest client in Europe, and actually our largest client in the US because of the success we had with that. And within 5 years, Cambridge Technology Partners Europe reached $100 million in revenue, highly profitable, 9 countries, 13 cities, all because we got lucky and didn't give up and had a plan B to be able to deal with that big setback that we had. So lesson number 4, I learned about tier 3 customers in business school. I don't know if any of you have ever covered that. Tier 3 customers are the ones that are small, they don't have much budget, they really aren't set up to accomplish much, they don't have any marquee value or brand. And so what I was taught is don't waste any of your time on tier 3 customers, you'll just waste time and money on them, focus on tier 1 and tier 2. But what I learned is that there's no such thing as a tier 3 customer, at least not in a startup. So when about a year after we launched Cambridge Technology Partners Europe, it was my turn to make an irrational expansion decision. I wanted to move to the UK. And so we had and it was too early to do it, but there was a sales guy from Hewlett-Packard named Steve who called and said, I'm willing to leave Hewlett-Packard to be your salesperson in the UK if you start an office here, and I have a prospect that I think I can close very, very quickly to be our first customer. And so I thought, salesperson, prospect, they all speak English, how hard can this be? And so we next day opened up our UK office. I flew over to meet Steve. He picked me up at Heathrow, and he introduced himself. We chatted a bit, and he started to brief me on the client. The client is a company called Economy. And I said, so what do they do? And Steve says, well, they're a trading company. I said, great, financial services, that's the hottest market in Europe right now. And Steve says, well, that's not what they trade. That's not the kind of trading company they are. I said, what kind are they? And he says, they buy and sell dead animal hides. And the way that works is that they have 7 buyers and 7 sellers. And if you, for example, want to sell 100 zebra skins, you'd call one of the buyers and say 100 zebra skins. And they would put that information on a postie on the bulletin board. And the posties would be color coded. And green were for pelts, red were for hides, and blue were for other. I never had the courage to ask what was in the other category. And then they'd turn them over to the sellers, and the sellers would call people in their network and see if anyone wanted to buy 100 zebra skins. And if they did, then Economy would make a commission on that transaction. So literally, they were a trading company, but with the most despicable, ugly business model I've ever bumped into. So we're now at about an hour and 45 minutes into the ride, and I said, "Hey, Steve, you said these guys are in London. Why aren't we there yet?" And he said, "Well, just outside of London." So 3 hours later, we pull into Liverpool. And Liverpool at that time was going through a major recession. The sea lanes had changed, the sailing lanes had changed, and that was driving that. Unemployment was 20%. 15% of all the buildings were abandoned and boarded up. Crime was rampant. Drugs were now becoming rampant. The worst place for all that were the docks of Liverpool, and that's precisely where Economy was located. So we pull into the parking lot and walk into the reception area, the lobby, and everything that could be possibly made out of a dead animal part was made out of a dead animal part in that lobby. The chairs had sort of skins that covered them. There were like pelts and skins that was the carpeting. The lampshades were made out of skins. The worst thing, they had the light switches looked like little deer hooves. And it was a damp day there, and it almost smelled like dead animal hides. And so I'm thinking, what's Steve thinking? Hasn't he learned about tier 3 customers? Small company on no budget on the docks of Liverpool that buys and sells dead animal hides. So we hurriedly put together a proposal so we could catch the last flight out of there that night. And we're surprised because the next day, Economy signed the proposal. So roll the clock ahead about 6 months. We now had 5 clients in the UK because it's hard to win your first client. And when you do, especially if you do a good job for them, it's easier to win the second. And then with 2, it's easier to win the third. And so looking back at it, if it wasn't for Economy and the work that we did there, then we might not have been successful in the UK. So now we have an office in Richmond, right outside of London, and about 30 people there. I go there every week for a day, and on one of my visits, I brought some mail back with me, and I'm looking at them in the taxi on the way back, and there's a letter from the CEO of Economy, and it was addressed to me, and it was a nice letter. I don't know if are you able to read that in the back, or are you going to read it to you? Oh, I'll read it. Okay. He says, "Dear Mr. Seibel, I'm writing to thank you for the work that you and CTP performed for Economy. We were losing revenue to our competitors on the brink of failing, but thanks to the 24/7 trading system that you built and implemented in record time, our growth has skyrocketed and we have regained confidence in our future. Thank you for being a huge part of our success. Jonathan Vaughn, Esquire, Managing Director of Economy." So, I don't get letters like that all the time, so I folded it up and I saved it, and I'm on the airplane and I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, he said trading company, and 24/7 trading was the hot spot with clients in Europe at that time, large financial services firms, but no one had entered that market yet. And he never said dead animal hiding trading systems. And he said that we successfully implemented it. And Economy could sound like a big financial institution. I mean, it rhymes with economy. And Jonathan Vaughn sounds like he could be a CEO of a bank. So I called him. I said, "Are you okay if I take the letter and just publish it in the press verbatim?" And he says, "Sure, where do you want to publish it?" I said, "Financial Times." And he says, "That's an unusual choice, but I meant everything I said in the letter, so, sure." So we published it in the Financial Times, and within 2 months, we had 2 of the largest banks in Europe as clients for our 7x24 trading systems. We never misrepresented what we did. We never exaggerated what we did. But what we learned from that is that, again, there's no such thing as a tier 3 customer, because you never know where those first relationships are going to lead. And it's Mary Kay, founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics, says best: pretend that every single person that you meet has a sign around his or her neck that says, "Make me feel important." Not only will you succeed in sales, you'll succeed in life as well. So business goes wrong, no such thing as a tier 3 customer, at least not in a startup. Number 5, everyone is in sales. So when I started Zephyr I left Cambridge. I believed that, I started because I believed that the internet would evolve rapidly from a standalone website that just generated static content to a platform that companies would use to drive e-commerce and enable innovation. And I believed also in order to do that, I had to combine delivery, and I had a bunch of delivery people that I had worked with in the past that were world class, and I had to combine that with internet strategy. And there was a firm called Zephyr that were 8 people out of the Harvard Business School that were 9 months into being an internet strategy company, so relatively new at it. And so I put together a business plan so I could fund those 2 teams coming together. And it wasn't really a business plan, it was actually 12 slides on a PowerPoint deck. But back then it was enough to generate $100 million in funding, which was the largest funding ever at that point in time. It makes me wonder if I had 15 slides, how much I could have gotten. But the issue was that the 100 was going to come for 60 days. And so the only source of revenue during that time was the existing Zephyr company that I acquired. So I had to figure out whether they were going to be able to keep us afloat until the funding came. And so I took them through their first rigorous sales forecast call. And as entrepreneurs, when you all go through that, it's pretty intimidating. It's tense. But you need to find out if the deal is real, if it's scalable, if it's large enough, and whether it's going to happen or not. And so I brought in all the 8 people from Zephyr, and I said, take me through the first deal. And he said, well, that's Deb's father's deal. Deb's father is the CEO of, actually, Father's Basement. And he said, we can build his website. That's real. That's going to happen. You know, she only has one father, so it's not going to be really scalable, but it'll probably be pretty big. So great start. He says, where did the second deal come from? And he said, well, that's Stephen DeMarco's deal. Stephen DeMarco goes to a bar to meet friends of his that he graduated in his class from Harvard every second Thursday. And last Thursday, he bumped into someone who said they're going to start a .com. And then that person said, if he does get funding for the .com, they'll hire us to build their website. Does anybody think that's going to happen? That has no chance of happening. So I said, now I'm getting a little worried. I said, tell me about the third deal. And they said, well, that's Matthew Berkeley's sister's deal. Matthew Berkeley's sister's dating that guy. Okay. And I think, how many more deals in the pipeline? And they said, only one. I'm there, please, sweet Jesus, make this be a real deal. Tell me about the last deal. And they paused and said, Matthew Berkeley's sister's dating him too. So I remember, quipping and saying, years later that if it weren't for Matthew Berkeley's sister's promiscuity, Zephyr would have failed. But what it really was is they were all in sales. They didn't wait for anyone else to do it for them. They were talking to their father, they were talking to the classmates, they were talking to their sister's boyfriends. And that grit is what really carried us. We grew to $138 million in 18 months organically, fastest growing services company ever in that period of time. Before the fall of the stock market, we were expected to go out at $2.2 billion market cap. All, I think, driven by the DNA that team helped bring to us that said that everyone there is in sales. Next lesson is how to build my team, but I've messed this one up so many times, it's sort of how not to build my team. And I messed it up a bunch of times because there's a lot of ways you can mess it up. So the first way is selecting your team too soon. So what I'd always do early on, and maybe you all fall into this trap, is I get a good idea that I'm excited about. I contact a lot of people who I trust, who are friends of mine, colleagues, who I respect, and I share the idea. Often they get excited about it, gets me more excited about it. They say, can I join? And I say, yeah, get on my bus. And then 2 months later, I have a better idea of the roles that I need and the skill sets I need to execute those roles. And I look back and say, who the hell are all these people on my bus, and how'd they get here, and how do I get them off? And so the lesson there is don't form your team until you really understand what the rules are that you need and the skill sets you need to execute those rules. So knowing that, when I was starting my next company, I defined the roles in detail. My co-founder David Lubin and I really thought through the roles and the skill sets. We went out and we found what we thought the best people were to be able to fill those roles. And we brought them to a conference room for a day to help develop a value proposition, work through the business model, and just explore how we could work together. And about 2 hours into it, the conversation started to deteriorate. And people started talking about, what's my title? Or am I going to work for them, or are they going to work for me? Or what size office do I have? Or compensation or options. All this stuff that has nothing to do with building a special company. And no matter how hard I tried to elevate the conversation, it continued to fall back to that. So I disbanded it way early before lunch, and we adjourned the meeting. I walked out with David, and in the parking lot, I said, David, so what do you think about our dream team? And he looked at me and said, biggest group of assholes I've ever met. And that's when we formed the no a-hole rule, which is we believe that there are enough world-class talented people in the world out there that aren't a-holes that we can hire directly from that subset of the general population. And we enforce that by saying anybody that does any hiring, all has to happen is one person to say that person fails the a-hole test, and we won't bring that person on board. So then I learned that doesn't make any sense at all. I overestimated the importance of culture because we were rejecting people who were really, really, really good because they were different than the people that were interviewing them. The test they were using is, do I want to sit next to this person on a transatlantic flight? Do I like them? So I Googled the definition of culture: characteristics of a group of people encompassing language, religion, cuisine, social habits, music, and arts. What the hell does that have to do with the great hire? It might be someone you like to hang out with, but what that does is it crushes diversity. It brings everyone in just like the team. And so I thought the right word is values. Values are principles and standards of behavior. And it's really values that I think really define what you look for in a team. So that's sort of the journey I went through. The story behind that is when I started Mobiquity. I was sensitive to that culture. I was sensitive to roles. I brought in a bunch of people that I worked with before that I liked. I made sure they all had world-class skill sets. We spent a week in my place on Cape Cod going through the business model, working through the value proposition just to make sure we could work together. That went great. And then I do what I always do is take that idea and socialize it with some prospects to see if I got it right. And so I had an introduction to an executive from a bank, and she took the meeting in New York City. And I came in and I just asked, what are you doing in mobile? Because my value proposition of Mobiquity was that I believe mobile was going to evolve quickly from silly apps and phone calls to a platform combined with social, Internet of Things, big data and analytics, and the cloud to be able to enable companies to run their business and in many cases transform the way they do their business. And so I went to the meeting and I said, so what are you doing in mobile? And she said, what's our biggest project it's really on our radar screen? And so I'm checking all my blogs on that value proposition thing that I showed you. And we're really serious about it, and we're going to spend a lot of money on it, and I'm getting really excited. And she said, and we talked to Forrester and Gartner, the two analyst firms, and they've given us a name of 35 companies that have the skill sets and the credentials to be able to deliver on that. I'm too late. So I start to pack up, and she says, well, tell me about your value proposition. And I took her through what I just told you, and her eyes lit up and she said, that's exactly what we need. That's what we're looking for. Nobody else said that. What the heck? We're going to add you to the list. You're number 36. What's your name? What's the name of the company? We don't have a company. We don't have a name. And so what I said is, well, we're thinking of changing. I can't tell her I don't have a name. We're thinking of changing the name, and we're going to come up with it tonight, and we'll let you know what our new name is tomorrow. And she said, okay. So I called her the next day and said, it's Mobilocity, which was at the time. And so we reassembled the group. We're working through the methodology and the business and the deck, the pitch deck and everything. And then she calls about a week later and says, good news, we've narrowed the list based on due diligence, and we've eliminated 25 of the companies, or 26 of the companies. You're in the top 10. And we're going to ask you to come in and pitch to the bank in 4 weeks on a Friday, and you have the last slot. So now we're working even harder to get that done, and we get into the meeting, and we have time in the lobby, so I'm looking and seeing who else is pitching there, and it's all of the top firms in the industry. And I'm thinking, we don't have any chance to win this. My team is up presenting. They're really, really good. They know what so they're doing a good job. But just in the audience while they're talking, I decided to rewrite the close, and the close was up to me. So I still have the letter here. So I'll just read it to you. So it was my turn. My team was done. I said, thank you for your time and attention today. I know you have a very important decision ahead of you. I'm aware of the solid credentials of the other companies presenting today, and I'm sure they've told you about the impressive mobile solutions they've built for their clients. And pause so they can nod their heads. Mobilocity hasn't built anything for anybody. And there's sort of pause there. That's right. You heard me correctly. We haven't built anything for anybody. Not yet. We don't have any clients. And if you select us, you'll be our first. So now they're starting to chuckle, some louder than others. But what we do have are the lead architects and designers from 4 of the companies that pitched to you today. They are the people who designed and built the solutions that our competitors impressed you with. Our competitors may have case studies and references, but we have the people who created those case studies and references. So now they're not chuckling, they're kind of staring. Our first team members chose Mobilocity because they believe in our potential and the track record of the individuals on our team. When our first client selects us, it will be for the same reason. And if it's you, we won't let you down. I promise. So what the hell? We didn't have anything to lose. We didn't have any chance of winning it anyway. So about 5 days go by, and she calls me and says, "You won. You won the deal." And I says, "Well, how much? What part of the deal?" She said, "The whole thing." I says, "Well, how big is that?" She says, $5.3 million. We have to start next week in order to hit our timeline. And it was, it was like the dog that catches the school bus. What do you do with it? We can't do a $5.3 million project. It's way too big. And so I called the team and told them that I'm going to turn it down. And they said, you're crazy. I said, we won't be able to deliver on it. We'll fail. They said, so what if we fail? We'll still be $5.3 million richer. And that's when it came to the value issue. It was commitment to the mission. They were culture fits, they had the talent, but the values weren't aligned with the values that I had for the company. And so they all quit, and I was now on my own with one person that stayed with me. The day before, I had the top team in the industry and the biggest project in the industry. The next morning, I had no team and no project. But what I did have is a confirmation of the value proposition. That I knew mobile was on the radar screen, and we had that right. And I didn't want to squander the chance of building a special company to get one project that may or may not work, but would consume us for the next couple of years. And so Mobiquity then ended up in 4 years getting to be $80 million of revenue, sold a couple of years ago for a couple $100 million of revenue. And I was telling Ian earlier, that was my favorite award I ever got, because you can't beat this. It was by Gartner, picked as the coolest technology company in the world that one year. What do you get better than that? But it comes down to what Herb Brooks said when he was recruiting for the Olympics, where they won the gold medal. And he was passing up on some of the talented players, and people were saying, "Were you crazy?" And he says, "Well, what it's about for me is I'm looking for the best play. I'm not looking for the best players. I'm looking for the right players." And then just one last one, number 7, keeping score. So when I was wrestling with how to end my book, I was working with having a glass of wine with my mentor, Mark Fuller, and he asked me out of the blue. He says, "Bill, are you happy?" Yeah, I'm very happy. And he says, "Well, I thought so, but most successful people aren't happy. Doctors, actors, surgeons, musicians typically the more successful they are, the less happy they are. You know, what makes you happy? And I said, I don't know how to answer that. And he said, well, I think it comes down to how do you keep score? How do you keep score? And so I wrestled with that because I knew that if I could answer that, I'd have the ending for the book. And it was tossing and turning, and how do you come up with an answer for that? Then I remembered years ago I was on a board for a company called Profit Tech, and there was a guy there named Dan Ariely who was a behavioral anthropologist, and he was on the board as well. And at the end of every board meeting, we had a dinner, and at the dinner he would get up with a glass of wine and talk about research that he had just done, and it'd be stuff like why people spend money, why they lie, why they cheat. And so he would tell a story that says, my research shows that if you're on the beach at Cape Cod and you're dying of thirst and someone comes by with a cold beer and you say, thank God, how much is it? And they say $10, you'll turn it down because you wouldn't pay $10 for a beer at Cape Cod. But if you're at a Patriots game in January and it's 10 below zero, the last thing you need is a cold beer, you'll pay $25 for it. And so he was able, his research said, I can predict people spend money irrationally, but it's predictably irrational once you understand what the rules are. So he would go through that time and time again. My last board meeting, he was going over the research that showed what the half-life is of things you spend money on. And so if you buy a house, the half-life is 4 years. You buy a car, it's 2 years. You buy a boat, it's 1 year. So when he was done, I said, hey, Dan, you're the expert here. What do you spend your money on? What has the highest half-life? And he thinks about it like he never thought about it before. And then he said, I spend it on creating memories. They don't have to be special memory. They don't have to be expensive memories. They can be, but creating memories with my friends and family. When you're on a trip with your family, and even if the kids are bratty as could be, on the way home in the airplane, you don't remember that. You remember what a great time you had on vacation. And he says the half-life of a memory is forever. It just gets better and better and better over time. So that brings me back to sort of the journey of an entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. And the way to keep score is not just, did you have 10 exits or not? It's memories that you create along the way. And so I just want to leave you with this. Keep score by creating special memories for you and your loved ones. Whenever you can, savor every day of your life, enjoy the journey and treasure the memories you have built. And that's what I try to do. That's what makes me happy. So with that, it's the 7 lessons again. Open it up to any questions you have or talk about anything you'd like to talk about. Thank you.
Questions, raise hands.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to hear about, it's just amazing, like as Ian was reading off the stats of all the companies you've been involved with, some of those really key parallels that you found in, may have been different, very different sectors of what those specific companies did.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those key parallels that you've seen among those companies that have led to those being successfully grown and then
People call me a visionary, but I'm not a visionary at all. I think the way I do it is I'm more of a historian. I can look at something and I say, that's just like something else, and that something else happened here. So if I do it differently, what can I do it differently to make it happen over and over and over again? And part of it is as I said, is just looking for a problem that needs to be solved, that a lot of people are excited about. The companies it's hard to say what a parallel for me is beyond that, because there's been drone companies and predictive analytics companies and supply chain companies and cancer curing companies. But it's always something that when I look at that, I say, I'd be proud if I could help make that thing possible. And I think I have a shot at making it possible because it's going to solve a problem that people have. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, but that's where I start with it. Sir?
Can you talk about how you think about competitors in the spaces that you start in companies? Like when you started your mobile company,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a bunch of competitors over there, like you already said. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so competitors are good. It's hard to raise money if you don't have competitors, because if you don't have competitors, no one thinks there's a market there. But the key with competitors is to have them and be able to explain to a customer or an investor, I'm just like so-and-so, but. And your choice of that but becomes the definition that could engage people. It's funny, at Ubiquity, it sort of worked the other way. I had that value proposition of we build enterprise class mobile solutions that help you run your business, in many cases transform your business. And people would say, yeah, that's exactly what we need. That's differentiated. We really want that. But no one would ever buy. And then it occurred to me that they didn't have a budget for enterprise class mobile solutions. So we changed the value proposition to we build enterprise class mobile solutions to help you run your business, in many cases transform your business, and we build apps. And all of a sudden, the company sort of swelled. So getting that language right, that frames it in a way where people see what you do is tied to a problem they have and tied to a budget they have, but you offer a different solution than everyone else does, and that difference is what makes it important. I think that's what helps you differentiate yourself. So don't ever say I don't have any competitors if you're ever doing a pitch. Yes, ma'am.
What venture do you think you were most passionate about?
I think it was Zephyr, and that was the only one that failed by traditional sense. It was a company that really helped people see technology in a different way, where technology didn't become something IT did, it became stuff that people did. It was the fastest growing company ever in its first 18 months. And we did some really cool, impactful things with companies that I'm still really proud of. And the people still connect to this day because they will all come back and say that was one of the neatest companies that we work with. The failure part of it is that we were supposed to go public. We were going public, and the market cap was expected to be $2.2 billion. When we were on the road show, the market was going up and down every day, because it was that week back in whenever it was in 2000, where the stock market for IPOs was getting skittish. And the day we were pricing, the market was up, and then it dropped at the end of the day. So we thought we'd price well above what our offering price was, but it looked like we'd have to price a little bit below that. And so it was the decision, what do we do? Do we take the company public? It's a once in a lifetime chance. It would make me tremendously rich, even though it was below the offering price. But if we still have a lot of money in the bank from this $100 million that we raised, why do that? We can continue to be successful as an independent company and then go public when the market changes. And so it was really hard decision to make. But the next day the market had the biggest crash in NASDAQ history. And so we had people flying from Japan. We were covered in the national news as the company that dodged that bullet. But then over time, we tried to take a roadshow again, but our competitors that were public started to have an issue, so we had to pull that back. Then we were going to merge with a company and do a reverse IPO, and it was the company on Christmas was the site of the first mass workplace shooting. Can't do that. And then we were going to be acquired by a company based out of South Africa for I think $800 million, but the board said that wasn't the 2.2, so that we're not going to sell for that. And then we continued to grow when everyone else didn't, and defy the odds. But it finally caught up with us, and we had to sell the company for like $15 million to NEC. So it was a failure it was failure financially, but it's one I'm the most proud of, because I think we sort of led the way in an important transition and created great jobs and opportunities for the people that trusted us along the way. Yes, sir.
Do you have any recommendations for good habits and also like milestones to set, just to try and do the best in your entrepreneurial journey?
So habits I guess I don't think this is directly what you're asking, but I think it's if I had 8 lessons, the 8th one would be always do the right thing. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you're never, when you're a CEO, you're never sure what the right thing is to do. You don't think you are. Well, Jim Sims, the guy I talked about at Cambridge, when someone would be taking advantage of us, a customer or partner, I would run to Jim and say, this person's taking advantage of us. They're trying to say we need to deliver something that wasn't part of the scope. And what should we do, Jim? And Jim would say, well, just do the right thing. I said, what do you mean the right thing? This guy's trying to screw us. And it ended up saying, Bill, if sort of, you use the word habit, the habit you should have, we all know what the right thing is. We learned in kindergarten. And the habit you should have is always do the right thing. If you do the right thing, very often the other party will change and do the right thing as well. But even if they don't, we're going to still do the right thing, but just never work with them again. And so with that as sort of a compass that and then I think what I would add to that is just never let anybody down, never let an employee down or customer down, over deliver. There's a page in the book near the end that talks to something my parents sent me or actually it was something they saw in a newspaper that they sent me out of the Morning Chronicle. And it was like, I think, the most wise thing I've ever read, but it was actually an advertisement for a carpet cleaner. But the rules of, I think, of good business are all sort of tucked into there if you get a chance to see it. Yeah, Beth.
So you exited how many, 11 companies, right?
Something like that, yeah.
So why did you choose to exit all of them instead of like sticking with one and see how big you could grow it up?
I guess there's 2 reasons. So with Zephyr, when I thought I was going to have 8% of $2.2 billion, I sort of sit back with my wife and say, what are we going to do with that? So we made a list of what we could do with it. And we couldn't agree on what sports team to buy, right? So, and we didn't need a private plane, and we didn't want to screw up our kids' lives by just handing them a bunch of money, and so we came up with a list of everything we could possibly ever want to in our lives, and it might have been like $10 million, and everything after that we were going to give away anonymously, but when Zephyr went bankrupt, I went from getting $172 million to having to write a check for $1 million. So that was, it was a big swing. But we were able still to come back and say, this is no big deal. We have great memories from it. But one of the lessons taught me from that is to not be greedy. If you're able to I'd rather get 10 good wins than take a chance on getting, one, great win. And part of it is just I don't need a great win. I'm happy with the other, but the other part of it is I just have more fun creating something. And when it gets to be big and operational, and the job changes. It becomes, for me, it becomes more like an Air Products big company again, where I don't feel as close to the business, and I don't feel like I'm creating something. I would rather hand that off to somebody and see them be the caretaker of it and continue to grow it. So that's more me than anything I'd advise anyone else, but that's sort of what drives me. Yes, sir.
Do you have a few book recommendations that made a big impact on you?
A few book
recommendations?
Yeah, it's funny because when growing up, my mother was really smart, and she would always give me books to read, and we'd have a book. It wouldn't be just her reading me a book; it would be like a book club. I'd be 12 years old or 14 years old. She'd give me a book that was beyond me, and I'd have to try to read it. And I think I learned a lot that way. But when I came back from my freshman year in college, this was 1970, and so it was if you go from a Catholic high school in 1969 to Penn State in 1970, you come back different, right? And so I had read the B.F. Skinner book called Walden 2, that was the utopia, the definition of utopia, and it was things like everybody should get paid not based on talent and skill they have, but they should get paid based on how crappy the job is that they have to do. So if you're a trash collector, you make more than a brain surgeon, and you have a commune thing. And so I said to my mother, boy, this has changed my life. This is how I think things should be. And so she didn't argue with me or say I was crazy. She gave me Atlas Shrugged to read. She says, let's do our book club again. You read Atlas Shrugged, I'll read Walden 2, and we'll come back and discuss it. And I think that's if you ever read Atlas Shrugged, I think that's the thing that changed me. It made me feel like it was, it wasn't nerdy or bad or embarrassing to do good, and you should try to do as good as you can be. Probably the other one from way back then that influenced me was The Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, because it talked about the spirit that drives things that you're passionate about, and talks about your passion. If I come up, I'll come up with some more, and I'll shoot that list to Ian, and he can share them with you. Or my email's on the book. You can ask me whatever you'd like to ask me, then I'll try to answer it.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you came across like really stressful times, and there's been a lot of moments where you may have wanted to quit and hang up the towel. I'm curious what kept you going and prevented you from stopping when the times got tough?
I think it's not wanting to let people down, people that are depending on me down, they're because they're there because they trust that I'm not going to do that, and so it becomes sort of what I try to stand for with the people, and just the corollary of that there's well, I'll give you a quick story there are times I've quit. I'll tell you a story about 2 times I quit. So I quit or I got myself fired at Mobiquity. We had an acquirer that came in to buy the company. Services companies typically go for 1 to 2 times revenue. They were going to offer us 5.5 times revenue, but it was to buy our healthcare business. And the only problem with that was that we didn't have a healthcare business. We had healthcare clients, and our people were spread across multiple clients. And the investors still wanted to do the deal, but it would cause us to really disrupt the company. And I don't know if you know what preferences are, but preferences are an investment vehicle where if someone puts $1 million in, they get their $1 million out before the proceeds get split. In this case, the investors had 2x preferences. They were only going to sell 40% of the company, but they were going to kick in 100% of their preferences. So basically, the investors who own 60% of the company were going to get 96% of the revenue, and all the employees were not going to get anything. I have people who I acquired their company for stock. 2 guys that came in from after the Serbian-Croatian War, and they built a company, and they trusted that I was going to create value, and they were going to get nothing. And what was even worse was the board was going to create a shell company, so they wouldn't get taxed double taxation, because you get taxed for selling 40% of the company, and then you get taxed for distributing the money to the investors. So the shell company was going to get everything that we weren't going to sell, so that the money would go right to the investors. So we were going to disrupt the whole company. No one was going to get anything. We'd have 60% of the company totally decimated, and no cash because it went all to the investors. And it was, we'll take care of you, we'll make sure you're whole, but it just, that as a CEO, you just can't, you can't do it. So I wrote, continued to write, told them I was going to continue to write letters to the shareholders every week on a Friday, saying this was a bad deal and not in their interest until you fired me. And after took about 8 weeks for them to do it, but that I think as long it's this, I guess the chart I showed earlier. As long as the problem's still there, as long as you believe that you can solve the problem, then there must be a way to solve it, and don't give up. And the only reasons I've ever quit is because I find myself in a situation where I had an ethical reason to leave. How much time do we have left? Do we have?
Time for one more question, but Bill will stay late.
Yeah, 'cause-
And also before I wrap up, I know we didn't have enough books for everybody, so if we could get a piece of paper and if you could just write down your email address, we'll buy another set of books and email you when they're
Thank
here
you.
at the center to pick them up. Right, so for those who didn't get it, you may not be able to get it signed, but you're going to be able to see the in-depth of all this amazing wisdom from Bill. So time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up in a couple of rounds.
And if you do buy a book, and I'll be back in the Boston area in May, or you can have it sent to me in care of someone else, and then I'll sign it and get it to you that way if that works for you. Sorry. Is there any other questions? Two more.
Manage some incredibly high growth companies, and I'm just curious, like, how did you even build your team out fast enough to meet the demand that you were having, going from 0 in 18 months to IPO?
Yeah, I love that question. So when I was in Cambridge, we had to hire across 8 countries one year, 400 people. We had no recruiters and no budget for recruiting. So I brought my wife, called my wife Carolyn in my office and said, could you figure out a way of being able to do that? And she said, I have no experience in recruiting. And I said, well, I don't want best practice in recruiting. I want a breakthrough way of being able to think about how to make that happen. And so she said, how long do I have? I said, 3 weeks. She came back a week later, and she says, here's what we'll do. She said, the first issue with recruiting is just that the timing of it. You screen people. That might take a couple of weeks. Then you say, okay, I want Dan to come in and meet the team. When is the team available? And that might take another couple of weeks. And then after they go through that process, there's another set of interviews, and that might take another couple of weeks. And all the while, it's hard to get feedback from people all along the way, and it doesn't build momentum. And you might go through 3 or 4 of those, so the recruiting process might take 5 months. And the feedback isn't that clear. And Carol said that most people in an interview end up talking more than listening, and they really aren't there to uncover any specific issues. And so what we're going to do differently is, if we're going to have 4 interviewers, we're going to make them 15-minute interviews, and each of them is going to have a role. You're going to check for culture, you're going to check for skills, you're going to check for experience, and we're going to position them to happen in a day when we bring in 20 people. I'm going to find 20 people, I'm going to screen them, I'm going to bring them in, and we're all going to come to the office. You need to be with your team in Amsterdam this Thursday and London the following Thursday. And when they come in, there'll be refreshments, and you get up and you talk about the company. What better person to hear that from than the CEO? You don't need to hear it from the next 4 interviewers. The next person is going to get up and talk about, somebody who's just worked there for a short period of time, talk about culture. You don't need to talk about culture again. Then a salesperson is going to come up and talk about the value that we provide for customers. No one needs to talk about that again. And then when you get all the way through that process, there'll be a little break that people can just talk, and we'll seed it with some questions to see how people interact in a group. And then we'll finish it with one more, and then we'll have a reception and send them home. But then all the interviewers will come in and make a decision on the spot. And so it goes from an interview process that is unorganized, that is indirected, to one that lasts a day. So that next morning when you wake up after an experience of being with a group of people like that, and meeting the management team and people that work there, and having it be an event, and then the next day getting an offer letter pending references, that built momentum. So we I think 350 people we hired that year across all those geographies like that, and the hires, I think, were a lot better hires that stayed the test of time. So I guess short answer is anytime you want to do something that doesn't seem like it's possible, don't do it the way everyone else does it, because then it won't be possible. Break it apart and think through what the pieces are, and engineer something that directly gets you to what you need. And I know you had another question, so I'm happy to answer with you after we break here.
That's fine. So join me. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, thank you.
Fantastic.
Appreciate it.